The second file indexed here at the Cryptic Archive is a phenomenon that has touched me personally and thousands of other people across the world. Let me introduce entry number 0002, the Shadow People. Shadow people first came into the public spotlight on a radio show called Coast to Coast AM in around the year 2001. The host, Art Bell, was interviewing a Native American elder named Thunderstrikes about the shadow people. The audience was asked to submit their pictures and stories about the strange beings, and many of those drawings were shared across the internet via CTC's website. Since then, more and more people have shared their experience with others, with the vast connectivity of the internet making the shadow people a much more discussed and known topic. But what are the shadow people? Have you ever felt like someone was looking at you when you were alone in a room with nobody else there? Or perhaps maybe while watching TV you continually see something moving at the edge of your peripheral vision only to find that nothing is there when you look? If so, it's very possible you might have already encountered shadow people. Shadow people take the form of a human, usually male, or at least androgynous, since they don't typically have many bodily features. They are described as black, featureless silhouettes that can dart around rather quickly among the shadows. Some shadow people have a more defined outline, while others are more see-through and ephemeral. Some even claim they can shapeshift, although I've never encountered this in my experience. I've heard stories about shadow people wearing hoods, having glowing red eyes, and some even being exceptionally tall in the range between 7 and 10 feet. Many claim the entities to be relatively harmless, saying they just lurk in the background, observing, while others have had much more sinister encounters with these beings, being awoken by them late at night as a dark figure stands beside their bed, and in extreme cases, there have been tales of personal assault. Some even talk about shadow people jumping on their chest while they sleep and choking them. In that sense, shadow people could even be connected to night terrors or sleep paralysis. For those who haven't heard of sleep paralysis, it's a phenomenon where a person falls asleep but sees the world as though they were still awake. The person is unable to move or speak and is usually assailed by a malicious entity. It is very common for people suffering from sleep paralysis to talk about this entity sitting on their chest and keeping them from being able to breathe. Shadow people have been equated to interdimensional aliens, or even demons in some cases, given many claim saying the name of Jesus Christ scares them off. But the worst of them all is the big bad of all shadow people, the Hat Man. Here, an expert on shadow people named Heidi Hollis describes the Hat Man.
And now, then there's something that's even worse than the shadow beings. Like I see the shadow people as being like a minion to the Hat Man. And the Hat Man is this guy that wears a three-piece suit, trench coat, cape, sometimes a top hat. Sometimes he'll change up his outfit, but not a whole ton. Sometimes he doesn't even wear a hat. But his presence is so evil.
Normally, I try to take an unbiased approach to investigating these sorts of paranormal events, but in this particular case I have had first-hand experiences with not just regular shadow people, but with the Hat Man himself. In fact, I never even knew he had an actual name until I started researching the topic of shadow people. Imagine my surprise to hear the exact description of the entity that had stood beside my own bed in the middle of the night several times. As to making the news, there aren't really many articles that I could specify down to shadow people and not just regular ghosts. And to be honest, I imagine it would be really difficult for most people to get any kind of real proof. It was funny to find mention of them in this one article that talks about how CERN is creating portals to hell with the Large Hadron Collider. They even mention the shadow people conspiracy directly, although I'm not sure how much it can be considered a conspiracy when nobody is actually colluding to say that they exist with some ultimate goal in mind. They are simply a paranormal phenomenon that does exist. And while I can't say for sure whether the Hadron Collider is actually opening portals to hell or not, we certainly don't know what exactly they're doing either. While their mention in the news is lacking, there is no shortage of personal stories about shadow people available. The first-hand accounts are almost endless, and I was able to find sources from all over the internet. Many stories are from adults that had encountered the shadow people when they were children. It seems a pretty common occurrence for these beings to go after children, specifically as some believe they feed off their fear in a way. There is actually a website called shadowpeople.org with a huge collection of stories about shadow people, and the first page is filled with stories dating back to when the posters were children. This story comes from an anonymous poster who recalls their experience from age 11 in the year 1989. One shadow that seemed to dwell in the home I saw every night while I was trying to sleep. I'd see something over to the side as if someone was getting ready to come in the room, and there was the figure of a shadow, peeking his head around the corner at me. This shadow would pop his head, peeking at me continuously, more like it was watching over me, or curious maybe. The other shadow did not give me a good feeling. He stood before me in full form, a dark shadow that seemed to be dressed. I could make out he was wearing a coat of some kind and a hat of some kind. This shadow gave me a very scary feeling. I was so scared that I jumped out of bed, ran around him down the stairs, found my way to the living room, and sat there for 2 hours, it felt like, shivering and crying. My mother woke up and found me sitting there, me hardly able to speak when she asked me what was wrong. The next story comes from a young woman named Jackie who had experienced sleep paralysis with a shadow being. This happened to me again when I was 10. I was in Mexico. I just remember waking up and being paralyzed. I was only able to move my eyes. I was terrified and so confused. I remember looking at the corner of the room and there was a shadow sitting down on a chair. Also, I remember seeing a grin on its face. It went from one side of the head and to the other. The weird thing was that I couldn't see his eyes, arms, or legs, just an evil grin. Anyway, I closed my eyes and I began to pray to God. Then I woke up. As soon as I regained consciousness, I ran out of the room. After digging through many stories that happened during childhood, I finally found an account similar to my own that happened to an adult. This account is from a woman named Karyn, who also had her experience with shadow people in Pennsylvania, as I did. My account happened about 3 years ago in the small sleepy town of Summit Hill, Pennsylvania. I was lying in bed with my husband. At the time, we only had one dog, and he liked to jump in bed and lay at my feet. It was the middle of the night, and I didn't know if I was dreaming or if what I was experiencing was real. I saw my dog just staring at the corner wall by my bedside. I looked and thought I saw something. Then I sat right up and looked again, and that is when I noticed a black figure standing next to my bedside. I screamed and felt frightened. Immediately, it was gone. The figure was just standing over me. I would guess the figure was male, not quite sure. It just seemed to be male because it looked like it was wearing a hood, like a one-piece black garment. He had no facial features, just darkness. I could read stories about shadow people all day because there are just so many of them out there. I'm talking probably in the upper hundreds if not the thousands. Whatever or whoever these beings are, they have certainly been busy. Considering the nature of these shadow entities, I find it difficult to find actual photographic or video evidence of their existence. Who knows if their likeness could actually be photographed if you could manage to catch them, especially considering they usually disappear the moment you actually look at them. I was surprised to see that there were lots of videos floating around though. The big problem with video evidence though, in my own experience, is that they're usually very grainy. Even my baby monitor has better quality than most of these videos, and that alone makes it difficult to discern what you're looking at. This one here even looks like it could be an actual person crawling along the floor, and there's noise to accompany it as well. I've never encountered shadow people making noise as they moved or walked, so that to me is a dead giveaway that it's faked. So as far as I'm concerned, most of these videos are interesting, but nothing more than that. The only one I saw that I found a bit more than interesting was this video. The man speaking is clearly distressed and has been hearing something banging a door on the property he's been guarding. I believe he was a security guard. But what's most convincing is that when he goes down to confront whatever is slamming the door, a shadow person is caught running by. If you look closely, you can even see that the outdoor ashtray moves when the being passes through it. I'm not easily convinced one way or the other by video evidence, since things can be faked without much effort, but this is definitely an interesting special effect, if that's what it is. So what do you make of the shadow people? Are they real, or have thousands of people simply had a strange coincidental experience? If you think they're real, then what do you believe they are? Ghosts? Aliens? Demons? And for what purpose do they visit so many at night while at their most vulnerable? I for one know they exist, as I've seen them more times than I'd like to admit. but I'd love to hear your thoughts and any personal experiences you might have had in the comments below. If you have a longer story you'd like to share with me, send it to my email at me@crypticarchive.com. If you like hearing about paranormal experiences and other creepy cryptids, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more about my own harrowing accounts with shadow people, head over to my Patreon and sign up for access to all of my personal stories. It's not just shadow people documented there, but also the many other personal and paranormal experiences I've dealt with. It really helps me to keep the channel going too, considering starting out is notoriously difficult on YouTube. The Patreon link is in the info below, and you can pledge any amount you desire. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share the video if you've enjoyed it. I'll be sorting this one into my paranormal file. Entry number 0002 on the shadow people complete.